1, 2, 3, 4, Panzerkampfwagen War. Hello my beloved glue sniffers. It's been some time since I built an armored model, so let's fix that. The Panzer IV is like Volkswagen Passat of the German army during the Second World War. Dependable, common and everywhere. Its last short barrel version was released by Tamiya in 2020, so it's still a fresh offering. What's cool, you have a choice between the Panzer Grey variant and Dunkelgelb with green khaki splotches. Inside the box, we are greeted with high quality figures, and there are two types of plastic bags and... what? To clarify, the model was released in 2020, but the running gear and lower hull come from 1994 kit. Is this a big problem? No, because we're still dealing with Tamiya's top quality stuff. Of course, forget about photo etch threads and parts broken into 80 sprues. This kit is designed to give you fun while building. So chop chop snap snap, and I accidentally built the rear hull section. That's Tamiya's, of course. I also added some texture with putty mixed with thin cement. Even if this section comes from 1994, there are no issues with parts fitting. We are also greeted by poly caps to hold the drive sprocket, but the mated caps hold strong enough so the caps aren't necessary. The center seam was mostly removed from the road wheels and return rollers because even though it exists in real tank, on the model is too far pronounced. Now let's do some damage by replacing cavities in rubber colors. It's a lovely touch that doesn't require much commitment. Please mind the blade, by the way, but adds a lot of sharpness to the miniature. Unfortunately, the link and length tracks are full of ejection pin marks. They are visible even on single links. To get rid of them, I usually use white putty diluted with glue. A gentle bubble drop is enough, then wait until it dries and scrape it away with rounded blade. This works well for all these pin bastards that are too shallow for filling but too deep to sand away. When building the upper track sections, we are supported by a nice runner guide to replicate the sag made by the return rollers. The road wheels have loose feet and mounting the track would be too difficult, so I simply glued them in place, leaving the idler wheels and drive brackets movable. Link and length tracks were glued and shaped in the old school way. Based on the instructions, I lined them in the correct order, cemented with thin glue, waited 2 minutes until they were connected yet still flexible, and wrapped them around the suspension. Before assembling the hull, I replicated flame cuts and welds on the section edges. I went the simplest way, slashing the surface with the blade. The model has this detail lightly pronounced. Actually, this is the best moment to consider beating up the miniature a bit more to imitate the hardships of the Eastern Front campaign in 1942. The fenders were too thick, I did them with some mechanical brute force to make them more realistic and to bend them. If you look at Panzer fenders, you'll notice they were straight and neat only when leaving the factory on during parades. I also removed one front and one rear mudguard. Of course, everything fits correctly, and my delicate modifications, let's name it delicate modifications, had no impact on how parts fell together. At this stage I didn't know if I wanted to include figures, so to be safe rather than sorry, I painted the interior side of the hull. Spoiler alert, I will add one figure later off camera. Fit issues were minor. A few parts needed some filler, like the rear side of the hull where I used a reasonable amount of superglue. Later I scraped away the excess. The gun mantlet also required some extra attention. Inside the turret, there are major parts of the gun, in case you wanted to open the side hatches for crew figures. The commander's cupola was the only element I struggled with. Maybe it was my distraction or ambiguities in the instructions, but I had to cheat a little to get it in a correct position. Then I scraped out some of the stock weld lines because they look too artificial. This brings us to something that may need with criticism: steel textures. To replicate them, I use white and grey Tamiya putty diluted with thin cement. The white one has a finer texture while the grey one is rougher. Some may say that Panzer I's, II's, III's and IV's were as smooth as face of an 18 years old model. I've studied photos of Panzer IV's including the F variant, and although they were built with welded flat plates, these plates still had some texture from metal processing. Rounded or complex shaped elements had quite marked traces of machining. To replicate welds, I mixed Tamiya epoxy putty with green stuff. My 4-year-old Tamiya epoxy had become much harder than when new, but green stuff is too sticky for my taste. I don't want to blow my whistle, but I reached the point I really wanted. My Panzer has nicely varied surface textures with lighter ones contrasting against rougher wire areas. The metal MG comes from the master set, and contrary to the turret one, it's very visible. It looks way better than the stock part. I also found some track links in my box of abundance, perfect for the project. Many Panzer IV crews reinforce their armor in sensitive or exposed areas. The vehicle was also planned with stowage, nothing in a mule-like style, but a mix of military equipment and random boxes. The first type comes from a legend resin set dedicated to the Panzer II, the other boxes are from Vallejo. To make tarps I use sandwich paper, then I soaked it in water with diluted PVA glue and folded into shape. I used several pieces to fit the resin part, and for the second tarp I took a larger piece. This was my first opportunity to try silicone brushes for shaping. I bought them 2 years ago but never had a chance to use them. Then I filled any holes and smoothed the edges with MIG Ultra Glue. Probably the biggest revelation in my workshop since the JLC razor saw. Once the tarps dried and the glue fixed everything, I carefully removed the tarps for easier painting and cleaned the spots to remove any glue residue. This moment marked the end of the main assembly. The one-shot primer is a bit too thick for 0.2mm nozzle, but adding about 10% of flow improver makes application much easier. Unlike the thinner, the flow improver ensures perfect coverage. As I have mentioned in previous videos, one-shot primer isn't the best on the market, but it works for me. It's non-toxic and doesn't knock you out with fumes. Of course, the king of primers is still Mr. Primer 1200 or 1500 for the durability and smoothness. Painting time. The tank is in German grey, which gives a beautiful canvas for shading and modulations. For the base coat, I mixed German grey with 20% pale grey. To prevent this from darkening over black primer, I added a few drops of gloss varnish. The mix was thinned in about 70% and sprayed in cloudy pattern. Then I darkened panel lines and corners with German grey mixed with very dark blue, thinned at 80%. Highlights followed in 4 passes, each step progressively lighter, mixed with ratios of 80% to 20%, 60% to 40%, 40% to 60%, and 20% to 80%, with white. Each layer was spread in smaller, more focused areas. I also picked out bolts, hinges and handles with light ghost grey. Because AK 3rd Gen acrylics are not as robust, I protected everything with a gloss varnish before applying decals. While the varnish cured, I painted tracks with red-brown mixed with German grey. From my experience, Tamiya decals work only perfectly with their own mark fit solution. After a couple of applications, even the thick decals settled beautifully into the textured surfaces. I also tried oil wet blending to make the finish more varied. It's a subtle touch that mostly disappears under later weathering, but I enjoyed the effect. A semi-gloss varnish sealed the paint before weathering. While it dried, I painted all the stowage and tools. The rear tarp was painted blue using layered acrylics blended over folds and edges. Tools got wood, sand and grey shades. I painted random chips on metal parts in rust, white and black, then glazed them with neutral grey for a more complex finish. The second tarp on the turret basket was painted in a sand tone with deeper shadows. Then 3 glazes of brown Tamiya panel liner went on the top. A nice hack if you're not comfortable with detailed acrylic brush shading. The same method I used on the brown stowage piece later. I have to mention the silent hero of my paint desk, drying retardant. I use it for everything painted by brush. It prolongs drying time, smooths brush marks, and works as a thinner without disturbing lower layers. Next, I picked out all bare metal contact points: the idler wheel, drive sprocket teeth, track guide horns. Little details like this really bring an armored model to life. One of the brown stowage pieces was painted in high contrast with brown glazes. I wanted to mix of military and civilian supplies to show the improvisations you would expect on the road to Stalingrad. The rolled out brag on the top was painted with acrylics and loads of retarder. Before I struggled with consistency and coverage, but the difference is huge. I weathered spare tracks with sand, ochre, light rust and then glazed them in medium rust. Because these parts are unpainted and just bolted on, they corroded quickly. The exhaust muffler got base grey, then light, radial streaks of white and German grey. Afterward, I added chipping and layered rust to finish it off. Chipping time. I mixed ghost grey and white in 1:1 proportion, added retardant and bit of tap water. Sponge chipping is quick but random, so I redefined it with controlled brush chips and darker paints inside large chips to create depth. Sure, it looks heavy-handed now, but after washes and dust, it all blends together. Pin washes followed. I first tried bitumen, but it was too bright and soft, so I switched to shadow brown, a perfect dirty tone that popped nicely over German grey. I'm a big fan of oil-based wash. They let you control hue and opacity. And with semi-gloss varnish underneath, you can blend them into their surface, unlike aircraft models where you mostly wipe them off. Rust washes went only on the tow cable. I didn't want to overload the vehicle with corrosion, because dust and mud would come later. When all the surface weathering was done, I glued the stowage and external gear back on. Then came the earth effect. It was my first time using acrylic ground texture, and it was surprisingly easy. Tap water thinned it, and it spread into realistic volumes and roughness. I trimmed seafoam grass to simulate dry steppe plants, packed into the paste and sprinkled them around. For dust, I applied dry steppe enamel effect on the running gear and blended it with odorless thinner to avoid thick clumps. The Panzer is heading towards Stalingrad in late summer 1942, I imagined dry dust sticking to damp patches of mud. blend everything together, I used Modeler's World weathering paint. The transitions were smooth and subtle, but honestly, I still don't see a huge difference from heavily tinted acrylics. Maybe it was made to make dust easier, but for now, I don't find it essential. Mud splashes were created with diluted bitumen oil paint because my enamel mud products had dried up. Yeah, I know, sad. Properly applied and blended, the oil paint worked fine. Dusty roads after a short summer rain, dry dust sticking everywhere, and patches of wet mud around the hull. To give the mud a glossy sticky look, I used AK Interactive Wet Effects fluid. It bonded perfectly without reacting with previous layers. Now just the final assembly. Just a bit of a lie because it still had to keep my guard up to avoid damage to the miniature. Luckily, the tracks mounted perfectly despite all the layers of weathering. I locked the spur links in place using a miniature chain from Mr. Hoppy, a detail that always adds realism. That's the beauty of the armor modeling. More freedom, more storytelling you get with aircraft kit. Finally, I sprayed a thin matte varnish layer to unify the finish and hide any shiny glue mark. And there she is, Tamiya's 1/35th scale Panzer IV. Sure, I still see flaws. That endless chase for perfection. but as someone who's only recently started building an armor portfolio, learning everything from scratch, I'm genuinely happy with the result. If you appreciate my work, you can buy me a coffee or sponsor a bottle of dinner by becoming my patron. The link in the video description. In the final footage, you can see Helmut. That's the name I gave to the figure sitting on the tank. Helmut doesn't look too happy because he just spotted the majestic Volga River and the start of the whole Stalingrad mess. The figure is from Alpine Miniatures and I use it to improve my figure painting skills. It turned out not too bad. Thanks to this, I've gained more experience to prepare even better content for you. This was a long build, and editing this video drained me, but I hope it brings you entertainment, ideas, or at least love. Until next time, my beloved glue sniffers. Panzer IV Ausf.F.